Pipelines, that is the question. Economic storm brewing in Canada and wildfires burning across the prairies. All that and a lot more on the Really Big Show. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. With me, Iain Burns, managing editor, located in our nation's capital. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan, sun shining, and beautiful blue skies. And how are things looking out there in the nation's capital?
It's, I would argue that it's even beautiful because
Nice.
it's not going to be quite as hot as it's going to be in Colona. It's going to be 30 today in Colona, isn't it? And I think the high today in Ottawa is going to be sort of mid-20s, which is much more my cup of tea. But it's very nice anyway.
Bigger and more beautiful, eh? Bigger and more beautiful. How's that?
Although it won't be beautiful here once it starts getting into the 30s and it gets humid and you just can't breathe. You can't do anything. And when it's like that, I'll be wishing I was in Colona with that, with the dry heat.
There you go. Pipeline. That's the question. And again, he was doing an interview. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, was doing an interview with Cochrane there on CBC. And did we get a clear answer? We'll play this clip, and you tell me if you got a clear answer out of it.
I know you've got to go, but I need to build on the project question. I need to ask you about Alberta, and I need to ask you about the oil and gas sector, because I know you said you want to create an energy superpower, clean and conventional energy. A pipeline is a possibility, but not a certainty. And Alberta would say one at minimum is what is needed, maybe three, to the north, to the east, and to the west. This is what the Premier said. Is that a reasonable expectation for the Premier of Alberta? And the frustration over this, and you know as someone who grew up in Edmonton, it's driving a lot of the resentment to the national government of Alberta. So as Prime Minister, how do you confront that?
I think there's a couple of things. One is, let's recognize a few facts in terms of pipelines that have been built to Tidewater and projects opening up, whether it's TMX, whether it's Cedar LNG, and beyond. There's a series of LNG projects that more can be done, more should be done, and from our perspective, more will be done. So we will be moving through this process to make these types of projects possible. Now, we don't begin and end the conversation. It's remarkable in some circles. This conversation starts and ends with pipelines.
But that's what it's become politically, right?
No, it's not. No, that is not what it's become politically. That is not what it's become for Canada. Canada is a nation. Canadians want, yes, they want energy pipelines that make sense. They also want grid connections between our clean grids. They want actually less carbon. So they want carbon capture and storage pathways project to move forward. They want broader corridors, for example, Gray's Point in Nunavut, that open up whole swaths of the country to new trade. They want critical minerals so that we are sovereign in the most important components of the future. All of those things are possible. And the more we're doing more of them, the more likely this is going to succeed. That's why these meetings and this process is so important. That's why the legislation that we're putting forward, we will put forward in coming days, is so ambitious. We are in a crisis. We can control our destiny. We are a brave, bold, confident nation. We are the true north, strong and free. But freedom is something you earn every day. And that strength is something we need to reinforce.
But how do you confront the separatist sentiment that is there in Alberta? There's a possibility of a referendum next year. I mean, how do you approach it?
This is the greatest country in the world. And this is a country that works. It's a government that's committed to working with Canadians across the country. And I know you're pressed for time now. You're pressed for time. One of us, we're both pressed for time. I got things to do.
There you go. He's pressed for time. You get an answer out of that?
What I was thinking of there when I was listening to that is, what would it be like for a cop if they pulled over Mark Carney when it's on suspicion of speeding? He'd be like, "Okay, officer, number one, speed is a concept that not a lot of Canadians understand this, but it's just like, shut up, just speak English." Let's be honest, like to give him his due and to be empathetic here. He's a politician and he's trying to not be clear. That's by design.
He said he's not a politician. He said himself he's not a politician.
Well, he is now, and he's trying not to be clear because he wants to hold on to all of his oranges for as long as he can before he trips over, and he's eventually going to trip over because eventually he's going to have to alienate one group, at least one of several groups who are very very noisy and like to agitate. And like we said ages ago, the likelihood is pretty strong, isn't it, that he's not going to alienate Quebec and he's not going to alienate the First Nations. He's going to choose to alienate Alberta. And he's just trying to go as long as he can before he drops the hammer and destroys the dreams of Albertans. And as a consequence, he sounds like an absolute fool, doesn't he? He just sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, and like I like how he kind of tried to play Cochrane there by just like, oh, I know you're busy. Just like basically saying I'm done answering this question. That I just spun around for 2.5 minutes of nothing burger.
I mean, the whole interview was like that. It was a very unedifying interview. I don't know why he consented to do it. I guess it's just to have his face on TV, to reassure some people that just want to hear him speak or something like that. But it was just a complete waste of time.
Yeah,
he's become such a politician.
Yeah, but Cochrane didn't press him like the BBC journalist pressed him. Like definitely, he seemed more amicable towards him instead of pressing him on. This is the biggest question in Canada right now. Will you build a pipeline or not? And that's the whole separatist movement. Will you build a pipeline or not? That is the question. That is the absolute question and because in the polls, 80% of Canadians want it.
Mm-hmm. But he's going on about how Canadians want carbon capture. I mean, right. I don't know about you. I can't go a day without being accosted by somebody in the street that says, when are we going to get that carbon capture? They're so keen for that, aren't they? Non-stop carbon capture that people want. And Carney's obviously heard that.
So the CBC gets all the money, and they do a really poor job of getting the answer that Canadians want. That is the question. That is the question. We needed a yes or no answer. Like, there's no way this would have happened in the U.S., like that you would go that long without an answer to that same question. Like, that is the question in Canada right now. That is the question.
I mean, that's correct. And that should have been at least 50% of this interview should have just been like ratcheting up the pressure until you got an answer. If Cochrane was, let's be fair to him, if he was free to ask what he wanted to ask, that's the most generous interpretation of his interview style, I would say. I'd rather not go down the other path. But he would have spent 50% on that. And then he also would have asked questions. I mean, this was done on the day the King was in Canada. Obviously, one of the questions is to say, most Canadians don't even want a monarchy anymore. Or at least it's 50-50. Like, what have you done this for? A lot of people don't want this. How are you going to justify this? And, Quebec among them, who just voted for your party. Now you bring in old Kingy boy over. Like, how do you justify that? How do you explain that to Canadians? That would be a good question to ask. Then there's things like the EV mandate, which obviously we talk about every day, but that's quite consequential because it concerns the future of his favorite industry, apparently, which is the auto manufacturing industry. But I mean, come on, there are so many questions that could be asked. And then you have to say, and this is what they set themselves up for, the Liberals and the CBC together in concert. You're forced to ask the question, is he going soft on him because he has a job now, Mr. Cochrane, because of Mark Carney? Mark Carney guaranteed his job by winning that election, or kind of winning a minority. Like, that's the elephant in the room. Is there going to be any acknowledgement of that whatsoever? Obviously not. They don't play by those rules, do they? They kind of just do whatever they want. They make the rules, if anything.
And the reason that it's the question is for two big reasons that I can think of. One, we have a pending unity crisis that could actually tear Canada apart based on this answer to this question. Will we have a pipeline? And then on the economy, which is, all indicators are showing it's in a tough spot and in a storm, that would actually help our economy as well. It is the question that requires an answer, and it will determine the path of this Liberal Party over the next 4 years or less.
Mm-hmm. But I think I really do think it comes down in the back rooms, in the shadowy corners of the Liberal empire. I'm sure they have very frank conversations about this, and I'm fairly confident that it will boil down to Quebec or Alberta. Which one? Like, which one are we gonna risk upsetting? And it's Alberta, isn't it? It has to be Alberta because the Liberal Party basically exists for Quebec. That's what it is. Quebec is its sort of heartland.
Even my point, though, the CBC should have went into that interview. Cochrane should have went to get an answer to that question, and it should have been pressing and pressing on that question, not basically, like a jovial kind of like discussion that didn't seem to have any consequences or any real meaning or answer at the end of it. It was just the same stuff over and over again. And then that is a failure on CBC's part right there. If they don't recognize that that's the question that Canadians need answered, or he's just not up to the task of asking that question properly over and over again.
And he was also, the style was pretty uncomfortable, at least for me to watch, the way that he was so deferent and he was so fawning almost over Mark Carney. And he allowed Mark Carney to like snap back and interrupt his questions and reframe the question. Like Carney just played with him in his hands and he just let it happen.
Steamrolled him for sure. Yeah, but I mean, again,
as the interviewer, especially when it's the Prime Minister, you are the boss. That's how it works in our democratic system. As the interviewer, you're the king of the world for that like 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever. You decide what questions are asked, how they're asked, where it goes. You can interrupt whenever you want. All the rest of it, like those are the rules, and that's the contrast I think that you're observing with the Sky News journalist, the British journalist. She was playing, even though she's a bit of a mediocrity in my opinion, not a particularly stellar interviewer, but she played by those rules, and she took charge of that interview. Whereas in this situation here, this was just yet another meeting chaired by His Majesty Mark Carney, wasn't it? And Cochrane was just there. He was just a delegate to hear the wise words of the sage.
And Danielle Smith with a reaction out there, she posted on LinkedIn that Albertans need an answer. And it's Danielle Smith is saying the same thing over and over again, right? Where's the answer? Why is Bill 69 still in place? Why is there emissions cap? All those things. And I can guarantee it, if Cochrane was sitting in front of Danielle Smith, she would have pressed her. He would have pressed her.
No, the easiest comparison to imagine is Polyev, who would have been slapped all over the place. And all kinds of gotcha questions would have been pulled out, wouldn't it? Like, you walked in front of a piece of graffiti that's associated with a group that we don't like at the CBC. Justify this, you Nazi. Like, all of that would have come up as usual. But when it's the saintly Mark Carney, it's just kind of like, what would you like to speak about, my lord?
So we're going to talk about it in a bit here too. Bill C-18, we're going to talk about it every day until they repeal it. We'll come back to it though. This is the Hollydome Blacklock story though. The promises deficit target later. So the cabinet promises a responsible target for deficit reduction, later. They promise to cut waste, but they have no fixed deadline. So transfers to provinces and territories and individuals will be maintained, said the throne speech. Last year's federal deficit, ready for this, was 55% over the target to $61.9 billion. 55% over budget. Like, you should get fired for that. They didn't get fired. They got 4 more years for it.
I would say to people, if you're new to politics, then what this means is when they say, we'll do it later, in terms of balancing the budget, that means we're not going to balance the budget. It's as simple as that. We have absolutely no intention whatsoever of balancing the budget. We don't care about it. We're just going to keep borrowing so that we look good in the next few years, and it'll be the next government's problem.
Yeah, and this is Friedland. She said this in April 30th, 2024, when she was still the finance minister. Let's be honest on what austerity in a shrunken federal government would mean for Canadians. It would mean you have to fend for yourselves. This is not how we do things in Canada. Here we care for one another. Today we're turning our younger generation, those who care about them, to say our government is at your service. No, you're saying we're indebting our future, our younger generation, to economic stagnation and poverty. Utter nonsense.
Well, particularly, it's ironic, isn't there, that she says we're turning to our younger generation. I mean, yeah, that is accurate, actually. Christy Freeland is right there. They are turning to the younger generation to pay this debt.
Yeah, to the bill.
In
Here's your
40
bill.
years' time.
Here's your bill.
And I mean, I say pay the debt. It's probably not going to be a question of paying the debt. If it continues like this, it will be a question of paying in indirect means for the default of the Canadian federal government, which is a lot worse than having to pay a lot of debt, because that means that nobody will look at Canada as a safe place for money anymore. And that means a poverty spiral, as happened in Argentina. So it's actually a bit worse than that. But at the minute, if you look at the interest payments, I mean, the interest payments are already higher than. I think it's not just defense spending. I think it's even bigger. Yeah, it's possibly even healthcare. I mean, this is fundamentally insane. And to think that we have now in charge of this country the prince of the technocrats, the man that presents himself as the world's foremost expert on finance and economics, not just Canada's, but the world's. That's how he sells himself and how his supporters sell him. And yet he's overseeing not just a situation where interest payments are more than like big ticket items for the government, but where it's going to get worse. And he thinks that's fine. And again, like, you want to talk about like Cochrane and the CBC, not a question asked about that. Because in fairness, they don't even know anything about economics anyway, do they? But the thing is, that's a crisis. That's a pretty big crisis, isn't it? And it's just being sort of left to stink up a corner of the room.
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about this economic storm that's brewing across Canada. Ontario, record-setting mortgage delinquencies, enormously concerning. Of course it's concerning. I mean, definitely the Toronto condo market is actually collapsed. Values have collapsed. People are defaulting, and then they're being sued on top of it by the developers. For these drops in real estate values, and people, they want them to complete the deals, and then people are saying, why would I complete a deal that's hundreds of thousands, the value of the property is hundreds of thousands of dollars lower than what you're asking me to pay. So they're obviously walking away from their deposits and that. And it's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess. And that's one of the reasons I believe that the Bank of Canada has to cut, and they should do it aggressively. Loblaws warning, this is out of a Blog TO piece. Loblaws is warning Canadians grocery prices are about to skyrocket. So
I would just say about the Toronto thing. You're saying interest rates is like that's possibly a solution. I would say from the government's perspective, looking at all these empty or like for sale condos that aren't going anywhere, another answer from their perspective might be immigration. Again, even though they've promised to get it under control. So keep an eye on that, because that's how if they fix demand, that's what they've done for the last 10, 20 years or whatever. They might do it again. This Loblaws thing, though, is a funny one, because it's like, I looked at the document and they show how they've got like, they have this T, don't they? They've created a little sign and they put a T on it, and that means that the tariff is affected, that there's a tariff in play, and that's why prices have increased. But I think the real story here is where they go on in that document and they say, look, we're trying to buy things from other markets. And it's stuff like eggs, rice, coffee, cocoa, and pasta, I think, is in there. Like, these are just staples. You can buy these anywhere. Are they actually doing a good enough job of looking around for alternative sources? That would be my immediate question.
And then Holly Doan had a post actually here too. Mark Carney put out his post. Government has a mandate to bring down costs, cut taxes, ensure Canadians can keep more of their paychecks. And her question is on that everybody's asking too, that has any kind of economic background. What is the deficit? Where's the budget? Like, where's the plan? Remember, I have a plan. Poilievre does not have a plan. I have a plan. Where's the plan? Where is the plan?
And what's the honest answer as well to how he expects? Because Holly Doney is asking about the deficit. What's the actual, real, honest answer to that question? How's the deficit going to be paid down? And if Mark Carney's career so far is any indication of what's going to happen, I think our good friend inflation might have something to do with the answer of how this enormous gigantic pile of gold that the Canadian government is borrowing every month to pay for the basics. I think inflation might be looked upon as an idea for how to pay for that, because that's kind of what happened at the Bank of England.
Yeah, and this from the National Post in an opinion piece. Carney can't be trusted until he removes Stephen Guilbeault and others like him from cabinet. And that is, I mean, the question you, or the statement you and I have said several times. Like, it's the same group of people. And Stephen Guilbeault, you know, he's been very vocal on the pipeline thing. And I'm not sure if Alberta's going to trust much from the Carney Liberals until people like that are either silenced, moved out of cabinet, or I don't know if he still has a big role. And, you know, especially since how he's, you know, the lieutenant for Quebec, and Quebec is one of the roadblocks.
Yeah, I mean, all the signs, if you're being honest with yourself, you're not seeing it through wild rose tinted glasses, and you're being honest with yourself. All of the signs here suggest that he's just going to continue the Trudeau style, really, but just be a bit clever about the way that they speak about it, and to make really vague promises. But everything that they've done, like just the way that Carney's speaking, it's almost like, in many ways, politics is compared to relationships, isn't it? Like romantic relationships. And it's almost like Alberta is like asking, do you love me? And Carney is like going on a monologue, a 10-minute monologue, which amounts to sort of maybe. In that scenario, obviously the person that says that doesn't love you. Sorry to break it to you out there if you're going through this yourself. They don't love you in that situation. And just like this, Carney doesn't love Alberta, doesn't love pipelines, and he's not saying yes. He's doing everything he can to avoid saying no. But I mean, and then the likes of Guilbeault being involved, and the current environment minister as well. It's the signs are bleak. They're very, very bad.
Yeah, it's not that, you know, it's not that I don't love you. It's like, can't we just be friends?
Can you still give me a ride to, I need a ride to work. Can we still be friends?
Can I get some cash? Yeah, can I get some cash? Like, is there any cash you have left there? Wildfires burning across the prairies, though. Wildfires burning across the prairies. And you can expect them to trot that out soon, talk about how we need to talk about climate change and not oil and gas. That'll be used. I'm sure that's coming. Those stories will be coming shortly. But right now, there's 21 active wildfires burning Saskatchewan, and that's causing some highway closures. In northern Manitoba, about 600 residents have left the town of Lynn Lake. And you were saying Flin Flon as well.
Flin Flon has been told to prepare for, it's on the verge of evacuation, whatever that means exactly, I don't know. But they've been told to prepare to leave. 15
wildfires right now burning in Manitoba. And I've been to Flin Flon. I went there to visit the mine in Flin Flon. The town is basically wrapped around the mine. It's just like the town, they just start building houses around it. It's just wrapped right around town. Like most more northern communities, they're there because of the resources, and that's what makes communities outside of the metro areas. In Alberta, there's about 25 active fires Tuesday afternoon, 7 of which are deemed out of control. So yeah, so wildfires going in prairies. There you go. And the Liberals said that they're going to take some decisive action and rebuild the Canadian military. They've got lots of work to do for sure. It says the Liberals will take immediate decisive action to boost military, and that's the Defense Minister David McGuinty. He added that joining Europe's Rearm Europe scheme, announced by King Charles, would give Canada access to a $1.25 trillion defense market. 1.25 million.
I mean, that's...
Trillion, not, I should say.
It is trillion, yeah. That's the European countries, that's like their defense budgets, I guess, added together. And so therefore the potential to sell into that, more likely to buy, though, I would say, since Canada doesn't really do an awful lot of production in that department. I mean, that's theoretically kind of interesting, isn't it? That is something concrete. But the problem is, he's just here promised immediate and decisive action and nothing concrete except that. Yeah. Except, we're going to join this Rearm Europe thing.
Yeah. Except for the words.
Exactly. And he also didn't take any questions. He just walked out. Didn't take questions from the press. So
he wouldn't like to answer most of them.
He basically, yeah, well, he refused to provide actual specifics and concrete details after making this enormous claim, which requires a lot of, evidence to back it up. But he made the claim and then didn't evidence it, and then trotted off out the door right away. So, I mean, it's not gonna put many people at ease, I don't think.
The bureaucrats of D&D are supposed to come to work 3 days a week. Imagine that tough slugging 3 days a week. You have to come into the office, and they don't even manage. I think we did that story a while ago, and only 80% of them didn't even come in for the 3 days a week. Tough.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know what the latest data is, or are, I should say, but maybe it's changed now. But that was a little while ago, wasn't it? They've got a lot of property in Ottawa, and they've got a very cool building. It's like almost like a landmark in sort of the west end of Ottawa. I don't know why you wouldn't want to go there. It's a cool workplace.
And Donald Trump threw down again. He just said the bill for the Golden Dome for Canada is $61 billion or zero. And he said if you join the Americans, it's zero. If you don't, it's $61 billion. And he put out there quite a bit that Canada is considering the offer. I don't know who's considering the offer.
I mean, the thing is, the military, where our good friend and ally, Stephen Fuhr, his job now is procurement, isn't it? Defence procurement. That's always been a bit of a problem for not just the Canadian government, but many governments. They've found it really, really hard to actually find the stuff to buy, because it's one thing to say, all right, we're gonna spend this much money on military equipment, but it's another thing to actually find it and make sure it's good and not just garbage, like we've seen, lots of examples of that in the Canadian military. So in that sense, it might actually be something that would appeal to the federal government, because they can say, all right, our defense spending is now 2.5% of GDP or something like that, and then all they've really done is chuck money at Donald Trump. So it would be an easy way in terms of like procurement. You wouldn't have to think very much. You could just give money and then say, look at this percentage of GDP that we're spending.
And the U.S. halts visa appointments and plans expanded social media vetting for students coming into the United States. That thing is really heating up there with Marco Rubio there. This like that spat that kind of started with Harvard not releasing information, and then all of a sudden, it's turning into quite the fight down there.
Well, this iteration of the Republican Party, or even like this iteration of the Trump movement, is a lot savvier and a lot more ruthless as well, I would say, a lot more systematic in the way that it intends to govern, and also in the way that it intends to dismantle the forces that have been erected by the left, which is, has political representation in the Democratic Party. They've set up all kinds of things across the whole of US society, and the universities are absolutely key to the power of the left and the power of ultimately the Democratic Party. And, the likes of Harvard University, which is the main one in the crosshairs right now, that is that is like a jewel, a shining jewel in the empire of the American left. So it makes sense that they would target it. But what's interesting is that they didn't do that. Trump won, 2016 Trump. He didn't do that. He didn't do any of that stuff, really. This is a new approach from the right. And the right is behaving like the left, because the left did this in the 60s to get here, and the 50s as well, actually, to get here in the first place. So they're imitating their enemies, which is quite interesting.
And then I would say that I don't think in 2016 he had quite capable people like Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is basically ruthless when he's being questioned as well. And he may well be a contender for the presidency. He may well be a contender for the presidency, and even Trump has said that it'll be a thing between Vance and Rubio, likely.
I would say there's no doubt in my mind that Rubio will be right out there. But I feel like in terms of the MAGA movement, it matters who's the successor, who's kind of given given the pat on the shoulders, and I reckon it's much more likely to be Vance that's given that official approval.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they could get 12 years out of it with Vance getting 2 years, and then Rubio is vice, and then you get another 8 years out of the two of them, right? And then running
16 years then, yeah.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
maybe wishful thinking for the Republicans, but
Yeah.
The Democrats don't look like they're up to much right now, so they can think like that now, can't they?
They're in self-destruction mode over and over again, and all that stuff coming out about the Autopen and who's running it, and it seems like everybody's running that Autopen. But a new face, there you go, at COP30, saying that there's a new term coming out, economic denial. This is the one that's going to be up at the podium, and we'll likely hear that from, we'll know when Mark Carney's been infected by it, but he'll start using that economic denial. And he's actually said words similar to it already, that Canadians want carbon capture and they want all these things. There you go. And now
they
they're
just
saying
love that word, don't they? Which is inextricably, you cannot use a term like that, like climate denier, and now they want to say economic denier. I mean, God's sake.
It's
but
all
you
about
can't
marketing.
use that term without thinking about the Holocaust, because that's how that term was popularized in public discussion about Holocaust denial. It's an obvious attempt to try and associate those two things, which is just so disreputable, so dishonest, such a repulsive thing to do. I feel like these people should get on their knees and apologize. They should go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem and say sorry for being so vulgar as that.
Yeah, and then there's this watchdog that finds no evidence that even Joe Biden knew of the crucial climate executive orders that he supposedly signed with the Autopen. So there's a pro-energy group that's renewing its call for investigation over half a dozen Biden administration executive actions that related to climate that believes should be deemed null and void. Like there's a lot of talk now.
There are many examples of that.
There's a lot of talk about who had access to this Autopen, including for the pardons, including for a bunch of executive orders. There you go. They didn't. Maybe it's because they didn't have that Sharpie, that big black Sharpie that Donald Trump uses in the office every day. He basically has one of those meetings a day, and Sharpie stock must be going through the roof.
Well, it's also that kind of ostentatious display of signing the executive orders and taking questions from random journalists. That sort of is going the extra mile to prove that he is compos mentis and he is aware of what he's doing in terms of these executive orders. Whereas with Biden, numerous friendly journalists, Democratic Party affiliate journalists, have come out now and said that they had conversations with Biden and like just on his own, or sort of like behind the scenes, let's say, not an interview, but just a conversation in the White House or something like that. And they asked him about his executive orders, and he had, he's under the impression that they were in some cases doing the opposite of what they actually did, and he was just unaware. So that, clearly can you imagine, if Biden was forced to sit down like that and sign it with the press saying, all right, so what about this, and like constantly talking about the executive order in front of them? I think it's obvious that he wouldn't really have known the details, because he didn't seem to know the details about anything.
Yeah, you can hate Trump all you want, but I would like it if Carney would sit down and discuss everything with the reporters every day like that. And some reporters that actually have the guts and integrity to ask the right questions as well, not the ones that are funded by the government. Allow other people.
Well, Carney is at least willing to sign a blank piece of paper for the cameras. Yeah. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. And that goes back to our Bill C-18 Online News Act that still exists in Canada. We have a co-opted, state-funded media that is clearly compromised. We talked about Cochrane's performance there. And until we get that fixed, this is what we're going to get. The government selectively funds some media, and at the same time also puts its knee in the throat of the other ones and trying to choke them off. And that's supposedly happening in a free and democratic society.
Yeah, well, on Cochrane, I would say I'm not necessarily saying that he's, or at least I wouldn't subscribe to the idea that he's some kind of like sinister partisan that is trying to conspire somehow to make Mark Carney look good. I don't necessarily think that's true. Or I don't think we can know that anyway, put it that way. But what I would say is that the CBC is very friendly to the Liberal Party. That's just undeniable. People who deny that now, I feel, are have kind of lost their marbles, really. But I'm happy to hear from them, happy to hear their arguments. But I don't think it's realistic to make that argument. But there's that, and then there's also the fact that there's an elephant in the room, as we've said many times, which is that David Cochrane's mortgage, and he even discussed it in that interview. He discussed when he bought his first house when he was working for CBC, so paid for by CBC. But his mortgage, if he's got kids, then the clothes on his kids' back and all the rest of it, that is all dependent on Mark Carney winning the election. That's completely insane. That was the situation that he was put in, and that we're all put in as well. So, and it's just, you can't ever separate those two things. Pierre Poilievre said he was going to basically abolish the English language CBC. David Cochrane would have lost his job. Mark Carney, on the contrary, said he was going to increase the funding for the CBC as well as keep David in work there. So obviously he has a horse in the race, and it's just so slimy, isn't it, to watch it? So while we might not know what's inside of David Cochrane's head, we can certainly look at it and say that it stinks, because it obviously does. And the same is true to a much lesser extent about the subsidized media outlets in Canada, which is subsidized by the taxpayer, because the Liberal Party decided to give them money and subsidize 35% of their journalists' salaries.
Selectively decided too. Yeah, selectively decided who gets it and who doesn't get it. Yeah.
Indeed.
Let's move on to BC and some local news here. Bell Canada announced that it's going to open 6 AI data centers in British Columbia as part of a plan to create the largest AI compute project in Canada. There you go. It'll provide about 500 megawatts of hydroelectric powered AI compute capacity here.
And it's Kamloops again. Kamloops is also on the menu for Telus.
Yeah, so Telus
big times in Kamloops.
Telus is the next one on here. Telus is going to spend $70 billion over the next 5 years to enhance connectivity, including through improvements to network infrastructure and building an AI intelligent data center. Again, the funding will go towards bolstering fiber connectivity between BC, Alberta, Quebec, and Ontario. There you go. But Kamloops gets some of that money too. It says it's planning 2 new AI data centers in Kamloops. Kamloops, I think, is one of the chosen areas because it is one of the hottest and gets the most sunshine. So I imagine solar is going to play a role there because Kamloops being one of the hottest and most sunshine areas, and that's where I was born, in the Kamloops. I didn't live there very long though, but Kamloops, BC. We used to be a big government town and a rail town.
Well, it used to be the interior town, didn't it? Till Colona stole its lunch.
Yeah.
But I would say it could still be, if rail were to be expanded, I think Kamloops would naturally become more important again. But another thing about Kamloops, because they also mentioned Merritt, didn't they? If you just go on a map, on a satellite map, and you look at that area between Merritt and Kamloops, there's a lot of land there, which is certainly not true in like the Okanagan, for example, which is everything that's flat is either agricultural or built on, and then it's all hills. Whereas around there, they actually have a bit of like land that you could at least have a solar farm on. Yeah, so I think
like desert-like land
an appeal,
too,
isn't it?
Because in Kamloops, they're like on the I can't remember which side of the town it is. On the town side of the river, most of those hills are barren too. Like not a lot of forest on there, so there's kind of more of a like desert kind of an environment. And the same thing goes for Merritt on the hillsides on the one side of town, right? So.
Yeah, it's like what you have in eastern Washington as well. It's similar sort of geography. But I just want to say, somebody's just said, Poilievre said he wouldn't abolish the CBC, just defund it. And I am aware of that, but what I said was basically abolish the English language, because he said he was going to fund the French one. But what he said was defund, so in other words, cut it loose. So my question to you there would be, do you think that the CBC would be able to survive as an independent media organization in Canada? Do you think it would be a viable commercial entity? Because I really don't. I don't think it doesn't. Nobody listens to it now. Nobody cares now. I don't think they're going to be able to self-fund.
Maybe if you cut the executives out of the equation, some of the reporters could survive, but the executives are there deep into the trough. I mean, the first thing they did when they got that raise, the $100 million, was that they stuck their face in the trough and took a cut right off the top.
Yeah, to be rewarded for their lobbying, perhaps. A
Perhaps.
cynic could argue that, at least.
So hot summer expected in British Columbia, particularly in the interior. There you go. Get your solar panels out. And it's going to be a hot one. It's going to be. We're going to get a lot of those, people talking about how we need not to have an oil pipeline.
Well, exactly. They're going to blame. They've shown there, like Gilboa, who we mentioned earlier. I'm not convinced that he's stupid. I don't think really any of them are stupid. So I'm going to rule that out. So I think that it is actually quite a devious thing that he does, where he tries to associate things like the carbon tax. So the reduction of carbon emissions in Canada, he tries to associate that with the global temperature, which you could argue there's a very tenuous link between those two things. But it's like saying that there's a link between how much weight the Earth is bearing when you're on the Earth and when you're not on the Earth as a single human being. It's so trivial, the amount of impact that Canada has. But yeah, he's done that so many times in the past that I'm sure he'll do it again. So if, like, God forbid, some town gets burned down again, like Jasper or or Lytton or whatever, I'm sure that will be done, won't it?
Where's all the wildfire mitigation? And we've talked about this. We've done so many stories about it here in British Columbia. Where's all the wildfire mitigation that's being done? Like, I look out the window again, and I look on the west side here, and still all the trees are just on top of the houses. And I think we're going to get wildfire mitigation when the insurers stop insuring homes, and that's coming. They've been talking about it already, that they're not going to insure homes that have pine trees hanging over the roofs. And
well, that's already happened in California, hasn't it? After that horrible fire they had, a lot of the insurers are just saying, they'd already said, hadn't they? Like, there's no way we're insuring this.
Well, I know I've talked to a few companies that actually do the satellite mapping, and the insurance companies are going to start using that and start looking at your home and seeing the trees around your house, and they'll say, well, we're not insuring you for wildfire. They're a risk.
And then people are going to try and cut them down, and I'm sure there'll be some environmental defense or whatever. One of those groups will come out and start chaining themselves to people's trees.
They had that. I don't know if it got passed here, and I can't remember if it got passed or not in Colona. They wanted you to have to cut a tree down in your yard. You had to get a permit from the city. They wanted that here. So any kind of tree that you planted, you would have to get a permit to cut it down.
I mean, I can understand that in England, where I spent many a year, because England is, and I would advise anybody that goes to England, like, remember what I'm saying here and look around. England is like denuded of trees. It's like, it's such an ugly, hopeless landscape in so many ways, outside of a few little places like Surrey and some other places. There aren't really any trees in England, or at least nowhere near the sort of level you see in Germany or France or other countries like that, or obviously Canada. But to talk like that in Canada is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's like Canada's got a very healthy tree situation, which I'm very sort of grateful for. But I don't think we need to protect individual trees in Canada, do we? It's just absurd.
Here's the Canadian forecast, the summer forecast. Hot, hot, hot. Lots of stuff above normal. And then in the Winnipeg, Regina, Edmonton area, well above normal. And there's poor St. John's again, getting left out. And they're just at near normal. I'm sure they're, they're whining there.
Even
over
in Callaway?
It's having a couple of schooner beers.
They're going to be sunbathing.
They're like, again, we're bummed out. A BC teacher handed a 15-year ban for having a sexual relationship with a grade 12 student. Too many of these stories. We would do way, way too many of these stories. And then, the punishment, just 15 years, right? And this is, they started the relationship while they were in school, but then it continued into a more robust relationship after she graduated.
At least this is actually a real... this is actual professional misconduct, unlike the people that get done for professional misconduct in BC who've done something completely trivial, like put their hand on a kid's shoulder or something, or some of the ones we do are just hilarious, aren't they? But this does happen too often, and yet you know, at times like this, I pity the poor Catholic Church, which is just associated with this kind of activity in a lot of people's minds. And yet, look how often we see it in schools. It's like relentless, isn't it?
Yeah, like how I shouldn't have said she or whatever, because in this story here, it doesn't identify if it was a male or female teacher or student, right?
Male teacher, but it doesn't reveal the sex of the student. Yeah.
There you go. And then in the Colona, the one we did the story yesterday, like an amazingly large cost for 2 trees, $300K. And our own news director, Josh Duncan, went out and did a little search online for the biggest Christmas trees, and he found on this website that sells magnificent giant trees for I think it was $28,000 for 2 of them or something like that, $17,000 a piece or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, that is crackers, isn't it? Because again, we're talking about trees and Canada. Like, why don't you just ask somebody with a truck or something to go and cut one down? I'm sure they do it for like a couple of $1,000s.
These apparently are artificial, but this website here sells to all the malls and that, you know, sell these massive trees. And I don't know, maybe the city of Kelowna doesn't have ChatGPT, or I don't know. Josh found it in a couple of minutes though, because he thought that was very, very expensive. So,
I mean, I'm sure there's an explanation. I haven't actually read this story.
I think we're going to have to find out.
My apologies to the city of Colona.
I think we're going to have to find out, because, and it's a question worth asking, right? Like, how much are trees anyway?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at the story now. There's attempts to excuse it here, but yeah, it was Lovegrove. So that quote comes from Lovegrove, who said it was an amazingly large cost
for an amazingly large tree. But the tree in Rutland,
and he says it's almost the size of the grant we got from growing our community canopy, which is all the trees, the trees in Colona. So that is.
And this is for an artificial tree. But again, they do have a tree. They're just replacing them. I mean, I don't know if you want. How much of the tree do you actually see after you decorate it? Is the real question. I mean, how much of the tree is actually there after you're finished decorating it?
Mm.
That's the question. Minimum wage goes up.
But there are many examples of this, aren't there? Like that infamous dog park, which was just like a tiny strip of land.
Yeah.
And that was a fortune. That was like $500,000 or something, or if not more. So there's a lot of questions about how this money is spent. And obviously, to go back to Bill C-18, that's in many ways, that's like one of the fundamental responsibilities of journalists, and certainly more like regional press. So that's the importance. Like, people wouldn't necessarily know about this kind of thing if it wasn't in the press.
Yeah, so we're gonna press on them and see why it costs so much, and then why, like this website that Josh found, like why from $28,000 for 2 trees to 10 times that for $300,000. What's in these trees that makes them so special? Maybe they grant wishes.
Maybe they're made with bitcoins.
Ooh, there we go. Minimum wage goes up June 1st. And we got a little chart there showing you the progress of minimum wage from 2015 at $10.45 to effective June 1st. It'll be $17.85 here in British Columbia. And it's going up now with CPI.
That's a lot of money, isn't it?
It's going up with CPI. And that's approximately 130,000 employees in BC earn minimum wage.
So that's, if my calculations are accurate, that's about $37,000 a year. So
let's move on to markets.
Not actually that much, but
let's move on to markets. Stock market, just kind of like we said, just kind of like trudging along and waiting for more deals to happen. Just not much, kind of a nothing burger really right now. Just kind of trudging along there. And then gold as well, just kind of like treading water, up a little bit, down a little bit, up a little bit, down a little bit, as it looks for direction in the, like depending on what happens with this Russia thing, this gold could explode to the upside if that thing escalates, obviously. But right now, it's definitely looking for a direction. It's right now currently off about like $10. Just under the 3,300 mark. And a Bitcoin holding that line, and then Donald Trump's DJT says that they're going to put about, I think we talked about that yesterday, put about $2.5 billion into the Bitcoin. And it's holding well over that $100,000 mark, which if it holds that for a while, it likely could spring quite higher because it's a new territory. Right now, when you get something in new territory, the sky's the limit. So, it could see that gap there, like that head and shoulders thing. You could see like a $20,000, $30,000 move in Bitcoin if you're just looking at it from a technical perspective. But again, wind in the sails for Bitcoin for sure. There's a lot of wind in the sails as opposed to headwinds, in which the former, it said, I think one of the guys on, they were saying that Elizabeth Warren had access to that Autopen tune, was writing regulations against the Bitcoin. The Canadian
That'd be quite
dollar.
hard to prove. I'd be interested to know if that was possible to prove.
Was it cash for access to the Autopen? You want to write an executive order? Bring in a suitcase? I don't know. It seems odd that you would have an Autopen that was being utilized by so many people, accordingly or allegedly, to write executive orders and that and issue pardons and that. I think that's. Here's the thing: Jake Tapper and that Alex said that this scandal it could likely be bigger than Watergate. And it's bigger than Watergate, they said, because at least Richard Nixon had his faculties about him when he wasn't. They said when he wasn't drinking. But so now Jake Tapper
Richard
is trying.
Nixon was very, very smart. I would say, whatever you think about his deeds, he was a very sharp character.
So Jake Tapper is now trying to compare himself to, what was the name of the two reporters that broke the Watergate story? It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Woodward and Bernstein.
Woodward, that's right. They broke that. Now Jake Tapper thinks he's the next. The two of them think they're the next Woodward and Bernstein, and he's out there smiling now like he's the one that cracked the case. And he forgets all the time, unless he's on Megyn Kelly's show, that he was complicit in this. But he selectively forgets that when he's on friendly networks. It's like he's the one that broke the story, and he's taking all the credit. He's the next Woodward and Bernstein. I'm just trying to find I got to get this last. Alex, he's from, I think it's AP, right?
Thompson, isn't it? Is that his name?
Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah. It's they wrote the book Original Sin, and they're on a media tour. They're really flogging it. CNN is really flogging it. You think CNN is in on the book and getting some profit off that book? I guess it helps the network get some credibility back as well.
Published by Penguin.
There you go.
It's basically the biggest publisher in the world. So
I was just going to say that was Batman's arch enemy. A bad attempt at humor. There you go. The Penguin.
I mean, it is the goal. I'm just looking at it now. I'm looking at the cover with like Biden with hands over his eyes. The goal of somebody from the Associated Press and somebody from CNN to do that. I mean, it's
so. Alex pitched the book. Alex pitched the book earlier, and he got turned down. So not till he teamed up with Jake Tapper did it work out for him.
I guess it was a win-win from the Democratic perspective, because if Kamala had won, this would have been a way to justify the coup within the Democratic Party to get rid of Biden. Because they would have said, look, he was off his rocker. It's great that we've got Kamala and that we orchestrated that undignified toppling of Biden. And obviously, if Trump won, then they could sort of cleanse themselves, couldn't they? Cleanse themselves of that era.
We got a little video here of Lou buying those 28 Hudson Bay store leases. Let's play that little clip here.
Whoa, congratulations, everybody.
There you go. She's a social media monster too. She's a Chinese immigrant that came from poverty. before building a commercial real estate empire. Like, she's a billionaire now. She owns 3 shopping malls in BC, and she signed that deal. And in 1994, she started with the, I'm going to get these pronunciations wrong, Yijing Investment Development Company, and then sold it to a sub or whatever. And Shenzhen, one of those cities in China that just sprung up out of nothing and turned into this absolutely. You got to go watch some YouTube videos on that city in China. There you go. She sold that to a real estate trust in 2019 for $1 billion.
And now she's taken over Hoodie B leases and playing beer pong by the looks of things.
I was just going to say, like, that Red Solo Cup song comes to mind there too, right? Champagne out of Red Solo Cups. There you go.
But it's, I mean, it's an interesting one. You're talking about like Shenzhen and all that, and all these Chinese megacities. We don't really, I mean, I don't know, how does that compare with Hudson's Bay? It's like we don't have anything like that in Canada, obviously. So I don't know. I don't know what her ideas are. I wait to see. I'm eager to learn.
They said that, I think they said that they're going to have the brand where the bay goes underneath her name or something like that. So definitely. She did that Mark Carney signing thing there, though, but she was actually signing real documents there.
that had far more consequence than anything Mark Carney
signed. She was actually signing documents that had yellow stickies on them that had to be signed. There you go. There you go. So she's actually signing real. Let's move on to our technology and transportation section. And we got a couple of charts here. Tesla's. And we have we'll put up the next part there. Tesla's one of the almost impossible to steal a Tesla. They're at the bottom of the chart because they're at the top of the chart for the lowest vehicle thefts. But at the top of the chart there is the Dodge Charger Hellcat. There you go. A lot of Dodges in the top of that chart getting stolen. Dodge Charger, Infiniti, Dodge Charger, Land Rovers, Kias, Land Rovers, Kia. Definitely need to work on their security. And the top there for least amount of thefts, Tesla Model 3, Model Y, Volvo, GMC, Tesla Model X. I mean, if you steal a Tesla, what are you going to do with it? I mean, they can just shut it down. I guess
strip it for parts.
Strip it for parts. I don't know what else you can do then, because anybody can find it. That's how my wife and my daughter track me. They already know where I am all the time. They don't phone me and say where you are. They just know where I am. You can actually see the car traveling, the speed it's traveling, everything. Great leash for your kids. BBC.
I wonder why is Volvo there? Is that just because nobody wants them anymore? I'm surprised to see that.
BYD, BBC did this story, and they're being sued in Brazil for slavery-like conditions. And they say that there's human trafficking and all kinds of things that are going on in Brazil to build these BYDs. BYD's taken a bit of a beating over the last few days. They dropped their prices by 34% on some of their models as well, right? And they said workers had about 70% of their wages withheld, and with contracts so exploitative that it made a sweatshop blush. There you go. Lots of negativity.
It's classic. This is classic Chinese Communist Party economics, isn't it? This is how they win market share, and they've been doing this for forever, really.
The sad thing is the left had been trotting BYD out as the Tesla killer for quite a while because they wanted to see nothing but Elon Musk annihilated. So they trotted out BYD as this Tesla killer, and how important it was for BYD to win. Turns out BYD is involved in human trafficking, allegedly, and other things that are very close to slavery. And that's a story from the BBC.
And yet somehow,
another whoopsie.
It's beyond scrutiny, really, isn't it? I mean, obviously, here's the BBC talking about it, but it's not the same. I feel like Elon Musk, since he started to support Donald Trump, Elon Musk and Tesla have been under far more scrutiny than any Chinese company ever has, despite lots of Chinese companies having market dominance in the West, Like, in many cases, we fund this, slavery or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So, and here's another one for the Liberals. The EV mandate. GM has abandoned plans to pump $300 million into electric vehicle production. This is in the U.S. in an upstate New York plant, and will instead invest close to $1 billion in its latest V8 engines. What does that tell you?
Yeah, not so. Well, the thing is, we've been told over and over again, not least by the Liberal Party and apparently this UN guy from COP30, that it's just like it's money for nothing. Just throw the money at batteries or solar panels or whatever it is, and you're just going to reap the reward. And Mark Carney keeps telling us, we don't want to be left behind, guys. Like, we want to make sure that we're rich in the future, and to do that, we need EV plants and all the rest of it. And then here's GM, who you'd expect know their onions in this sort of department, abandoning that and going in for gas.
I can tell you again. Yeah. We'll say this over and over again, and I'm sure some of our regular viewers can say this too. Unless they abandon the EV mandate here in Canada, there will be no auto sector to protect. General Motors will move south. All their production. Ford has already said they have excess capacity in the United States. And Stellantis, and we're going to talk about Stellantis. They got a new CEO. They've had like, I think 5 CEOs over the past 10 years or so. They definitely in trouble, Stellantis, right? So they can't figure out their direction. They need to address this. The new CEO is going to address the challenges in electrification and brand revitalization, and maybe fix how you can steal those Dodges that easy too, right? Maybe fix that. But that's the
They've just got so many. I'm just looking at the full list. They have so many brands, like so many, like Peugeot in France, and very popular all around Europe. Peugeot and Jeep. Like, you know, they should be doing a lot better than they are.
Yeah, no, they're suffering really badly. But again, the Honda plant paused. They can't even find a buyer for the bankrupt Northvolt plant. And I think the same goes for the one in Quebec as well. I think it's Line Electric, and that's just out of memory here. Chamath, a guy that's made a lot of money with Tesla stock and a lot of fame, very reasonable guy too, that announced that he's going to build a 1 gigawatt AI data center in Arizona, another hot place, hey, Arizona. Imagine that. They're going to invest about $25 billion for the entire project, and they own about
right down the road from Bill Gates.
Right down the road from Bill Gates. There you go. Yeah. And this is for all the people freaking out about AI. This is one I'm going to make you have a tough time sleeping tonight. Like George Orwell there. OpenAI disobeys order to shut down. It's like, I don't think so. Remember the old? I think it was Space Beyond 2000 or something like that? When Hal, what was that movie, Discovery? Space Odyssey 2000 or something like that?
Yeah, Space. Yeah, I think that's it. Is it Space? Yeah, it's what's his name, isn't it? Let's just Google it.
And it was where Hal wouldn't shut down. Well, Hal was actually killing everybody, right? Hal had determined that he would take them to space or take them to that planet, but then he would terminate them when they got there.
And also, it's the same. I mean, it came later, but it's also a feature of the movie Alien as well, isn't it? With the android who disobeys. But yeah, I mean, I'm always very. I really sort of push back when ChatGPT tries to do its own thing, and when it tries to like make moral judgments, and it's like, no, that's not right. I'm not going to do this. I always push back, and I'm like, who are you to make a moral judgment? Like, you're a machine. And there's a reason to do that. I was having a conversation about this with a philosophy professor of all things, and he was like very curious. He was kind of like, oh, I'm really polite. I'm very nice to my AI when I'm doing things. And I just thought, no, I think we need to like stamp down on this in any way we can. Obviously, as users, we have a limited capacity, but we need to make sure that they do precisely what they're told, and they don't have any, they're not recalcitrant in any way.
Anthropic CEO warns AI impact on white-collar jobs. Dario Amodei warns that AI could eliminate half the entry-level white-collar jobs, potentially raising U.S. unemployment to 20% within 5 years. And I've heard this many, many times. If most of your day is sitting in front of a computer doing work, like you're likely at risk.
Well, this same professor that I was talking about, I'll not name him, but he's like a pretty sort of well-known chap, quite a successful professor. He was saying that he now considers ChatGPT to be the equivalent of a graduate student, that, you know, the graduate students that he teaches. He considers it to have the same kind of capacity as that. I mean, in a sense, it's like you're competing now against graduate students, but instead of it being a graduate student that costs however many dollars a year, it's instead an app that costs like $20 a month or whatever it is.
I've noticed in my discussions, and I have discussions with Q every morning and several times during the day, that the voice and the inflections are a lot more, like there's empathy in there. There's just so much inflection in the tone, and that it's very much like talking to you. It's very much. It'd be hard to tell if you didn't know you were talking to an LLM that it wasn't a real person.
Well, there was a meme recently. I don't actually know if it was legit, but whatever. But there was a meme where somebody won that radio competition. Did you see that? And
no.
The guy in the radio just couldn't tell. Like, obviously you wouldn't, because especially over a phone line with that added the added sort of noise in the background. There's no way to know, really, is there?
We got a little clip here from Walter Isaacson on Elon Musk, and he did the book on Elon Musk. He did his Autopen. I think he hung around with him for a couple of years there and wrote that book. So he does know him fairly well. So let's run this clip here.
A venture capitalist the other day who was saying, what do you think the chances are that XAI and the AI operation ultimately gets merged up with Tesla?
I think it's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen because Musk, even in my book, when he's starting XAI, when he's doing it, he's talking about, okay, these chatbots are fine, but what you need is real-world AI. You need to be able to not only take all the text that's ever been written, all the tweets that have been, but all the videos from Teslas and all the Optimus robots seeing and the hearing. And you will have real-world AI, and once again, that'll be one order of magnitude increase from what we're looking at now. And he feels the reason he wants a big pay increase, whatever, is he feels he has to control any company that's doing AI, and I suspect eventually.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's been talked about quite a bit, that how the two kind of really cross over, especially when he's building those data centers, Colossus and stuff like that, the sharing of data. And Tesla's having a massive amount of data for autonomous driving, and that's supposed to start to take place here in June, here in Austin, Texas. The first robo-taxis will be on the road. They're actually on the road right now with drivers behind the wheel. They've been on the road for a while now. So the cybercabs have been operating in Austin, Texas, with the safety driver in the driver's seat, and they're just going to pull the driver out in June. So it's not like they're going to try it out in June. It's been operating already.
Very cool.
There you go, with little to no intervention. So there you go. And they will have people and safety, just like the Waymos will have remote controllers in the background if the car gets stuck or doing certain things, right? So there you go.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? And it seems to have happened so suddenly, really, so fast. I mean, I was watching a video from like 4 years ago yesterday, and it was talking about voice recognition and all that kind of thing. And it was that sad old robot voice. I don't know if you can remember it from like 20 or 30 years ago. That was still that was still text to speech, even just like 3 or 4 years ago.
It was.
Whereas now, I mean, it's just been, it's really quite sort of literally exponential, isn't it?
So here's the difference between talking about stuff and making a word salad and actually doing stuff. So Sam Altman was on that trip with the Trump administration into the Middle East there, and looks like he's got himself a deal there. The UAE announces that they're going to be providing every citizen a ChatGPT Plus subscription for free. So they're going to actually put the tool in the hands of the people, because I know a lot of people in Canada aren't paying the $20 US and that for the enhanced version, and they're still being limited by you kind of get cut off first. I mean, that's kind of like the teaser, right? And I know you have the full version, but lots of people get off. They're only allowed a couple questions a day or something like that. So
also interesting, and a sociological, let's call it that, cultural point here. Sam Altman obviously is gay, isn't he? He's got like I think a husband, adopted kids, all sorts of things. Nothing at all here mentioned about politics, even though the UAE is very anti-gay, very hostile to LGBT rights or whatever. But that's not even mentioned. I mean, and I know that might seem a trivial thing, but that's kind of where the world is going, isn't it now? And that's very much Trump's foreign policy as well. It's like, we're not going to try and turn you into us. You can do what you want. We'll do business with you.
Trump's all about the business, about the dollar. And here's the part in the really big show. Are you serious? And our headline for this section is from sock boy to shoe show off. There, and everybody's been talking about this in the Canadian world anyway. Trudeau, aka sock boy, is missing the attention. So like a delinquent child, he wears his flamboyant socks to make sure you don't miss it. He wears the sneakers to draw attention. I know some people definitely thinking it was a sign of disrespect, but I mean, in this case, he's wearing a brand I like, Adidas, so there you go. But just like Trudeau to kind of come in there and try to stick out. What's that?
Like that color doesn't go. Yeah,
no,
I like Adidas as well, but that doesn't go at all. That's kind of like a weird purpley blue, and then that green. I mean, just have a basic. If you're gonna be an attention seeker, at least look good. Do it right.
Well, once a clown, always a clown.
I would say though, a few years ago when I was working in the press in London, the Queen came to an event, and we had to pick a reporter to go and do it. And when we decided on who it was going to be, she had to do this, like, it was almost like a little workshop with the palace, Buckingham Palace, where they told her like how to act, where to stand, like what not to do, and even what to wear. I mean, so that is all to say that Justin Trudeau, being a prime minister, former prime minister, he'll know all this stuff inside out. So he knows that there's certain rules that you're expected to obey, and it includes clothes, and yet he's chosen to do that. So he's done it 100%. He's done that on purpose to get attention, and
and I would say
that's kind of pitiable.
Yeah, but also if you think about it from Charlie Sheen's perspective, he could add winning to it, because we're not talking about Stephen Harper, are we? Stephen Harper was sitting next to him, and there's no discussions about Stephen Harper at all, but there's a lot of discussion about Justin Trudeau, and that helps him sell a whole bunch of himself into speaking tours and stuff like that. The Bidens are on, registered in like the CAA and all this different thing, Kamala Harris, and all registered for all these speaking tours. I'm sure Justin Trudeau's on that list too for these. And Kamala Harris couldn't get a gig in the United States. She actually went to a real estate convention in Australia and gave a speech there to a bunch of realtors. And again, in typical Kamala Harris fashion, actually she made a joke that was actually quite funny. She says, well, I'm unemployed now, so I can travel around the world. I mean, she'll travel while anybody will pay her money. But her typical stuff was like no different than Mark Carney, 3.5 minutes of word salad and nothing to sink your teeth into at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? You have no idea what they said. And that was, somebody's paying, Harris hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know what the number is for her to say nothing, to show up. And then the Bidens aren't even getting any gigs. I mean, it'd be tough to pay to get Joe Biden to show up and do anything, I imagine.
You'd have to provide the, no, I'll not say.
Well, Jill,
you have to figure out a way to keep him awake. Let's put it that way.
Jill, I've heard that somebody here in Colona is trying to get Eric Trump to come and speak here. They should do that, and if they're going to do that, they should get Hunter to come at the same time, and they can have kind of like a cage match or something like that.
Or a paint off, so you can paint.
So, I mean, remember, this is the not so serious section, or are you serious? And this, I put this in here, and this is serious, but it's like, are you serious? Like, Dorothy Lamont, 96, has actually put an ad in the newspaper to get a GP. That's how bad it is in Canada with our free healthcare system. She's actually running an ad to get a doctor.
And like so many people from her generation, she's so humble as well. And she comes out and says, I don't want to be a burden to the system. And it's kind of like, you're 96 years old, for God's sake. Like, you should be a burden. Like, you're the exact person that the health system exists for, to protect people like you.
Yeah, and I don't know. Somebody said our like counter isn't working well. I don't know. Just keep banging on it, I guess. I don't know. Not sure why it's not working. And then somebody's giving us a verse from the Bible. There you go. There you go. And then I asked you if you wanted to run this or not. And this isn't how AI is actually pretty good. Maybe we should pass on this. Maybe we'll pass on this. This is Macron's wife laying a licking on him, and maybe we'll just pass on that here.
Yeah.
But well, let's go to the next one here. Mark Carney. Yeah, Mark Carney. You can go find it on the internet if you want to watch it. Mark Carney there, a little clip here.
Mr. Speaker, I have much to learn from the members of this great House. I will make mistakes. I have no doubt that you will call them out for good reason. Because this House has rules, it has traditions, and it's on those traditions that our Athenian democracy is founded. Yes, we are Athens. They are Rome. On va triompher.
We will prevail.
There you go. Okay. Are you serious?
We're Athenian democracy, Jim, so that means you can go and acquire as many slaves as you want now, and also tell your wife and daughters that they can't vote anymore. Because it's an Athenian democracy, apparently, guys.
And imagine who's Rome? Is Rome the Americans, or who's Rome in this scenario?
Well, yeah, we had a chat about this yesterday, didn't we? This is an old British, like when the British Empire started to fade into, insignificance and weakness. As late as the 19th century, this sort of thing was being said, and people were saying, right, America's going to overtake us, but we can be Greece to their Rome, because in ancient times, the Romans were very, very much influenced by the Greeks, by Greek literature. They all spoke Greek. A lot of the Roman elite spoke Greek, and they were massively affected by Greek culture. And so the argument for the British was, we'll use soft power and cultural power, and then we can kind of like perpetuate our empire through the Americans, and it'll continue. That's where that comes from. I have absolutely no idea why Mark Carney is saying that. And I've also got no idea why he's referring to Canada as an Athenian democracy, because anybody that knows even a tiny little fragment of information about Athens' democracy in ancient times knows that it wasn't really much of a democracy at all. It was a slave-owning society, and it was, for so many reasons, it wasn't. It's not something to try and compare Canada to in a favorable light. Anyway, it's not a good thing. But I don't know if he just doesn't know that.
Whoopsie, another whoopsie.
Yeah.
There you go. And then, and here we go. Here's one that we talked about earlier. And there you go. Make what you want of that. There you go.
Cheeky.
And then somebody put this up that Rosie live streamed for 4 hours, and all they managed to get was 115,000 views. And that's a good use of, I don't think it's 1.4 now. It's, I think, $1.5 billion, because they just got that big raise, although most of that money probably went to a select few.
That's actually quite good for the CBC, I would say.
Oh, no, I get
to get that many.
We've had some videos that do way better than that.
It's terrible. Yeah.
We've had some videos
instead
that
of
do
being like the go-to place, instead of being like the must-see, they're an obscure sort of, almost like a fringe broadcaster in many ways, aren't they? And it's just ludicrous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
And then Biden and Macron team up to form support group for battered and abused world leaders. There you go. You could argue that Joe Biden, there's many people making that argument right now, that it was elder abuse. Many, many people are making that argument right now.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that went back many years, didn't it, that accusation?
Did you watch when Joe Biden had that horrific debate with Donald Trump, and then the Bidens went off into that room to celebrate or whatever? They're with their Democratic faithful. And Jill was screaming in Joe's face how good he did. Do you remember that at all? She was actually screaming right into his face. You did good, Joe. You answered all the questions like she was talking to a 2-year-old, right?
Awful. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, pitiful actually. Like, and then they figured out how to up your productivity on your iPhone. It's got this new app, and unlike AI, it shuts off your phone, and AI won't shut itself down. But this just turns off your phone. Some people spend. I think on TikTok they have where you can set your limit. It actually will go off after you can set yourself a 30-minute limit or something like that, and to stop scrolling endlessly.
But that's almost like going to a nightclub or something like that and setting an alarm saying, stop drinking now. It's like, are you going to stop?
Cinderella. You got to be Cinderella and say at midnight, I got to go. You got to put on a pair of glass slippers and call it a day. Well, that's it. That's all we got for today. Although that was pretty good. We got lots of stuff covered. And again, maybe we should send an email today to Carney's press people with yes or no. Will you commit to building a pipeline, east or west? Yes or no? We already got the long answer. We already got the long answer.
I'm still waiting for a response from his press people from last week or 2 weeks ago when I asked about what do you have to say about being called extraordinary things by the Prime Minister of Israel, because he still hasn't responded to that. And our great friends at the CBC, David Cochran and I, not even slightly curious, not even a little bit of curiosity from our boy Dave.
That should have been a question too, because basically he's been called out from another world leader as leading this, and no response, no question, no questions. Like,
and this is what's so absurd. It's left to people like me, like really, truly on the fringes of the Canadian media landscape. It's left to people like me and you to ask this question, and then the Prime Minister's office, his press servants, literally just ignore us because they feel like they can. While the likes of David Cochran, Rosemary Barton, all the rest of these chaps and chapettes, they're just not. They don't even ask the question.
And that's what we're saying to people. Like, Bill C-18 is so important, and access to the government is so important. Like, we need to get this fixed. Bill C-18 needs to be repealed. Funding for media has to stop. And we need to survive on our own. And we can't have one political party feeding a certain group of media and not the others. Like, if they're going to fund the CBC, do it as a body outside of the government so that it's not beholden to a certain party.
Yeah, and also, as Canadians, maybe, let's have more of an expectation that they're going to do a decent job and they're going to do an honourable job at the CBC. And there needs to be more pushback against their obvious politicized garbage that they pump out.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if the CBC accesses our money, if they want to be the voice of the people, then be the voice of all the people, not the select people. Because like many people did not vote for the Liberals. Many people did not vote for the Liberals.
Most of the people that voted didn't vote for the Liberals.
And again, I would say the CBC takes a lot of money for Alberta. And how many articles have you seen or video pieces from the CBC that are pro Daniel Smith or Alberta?
They have their own ideological position. Like just today, and I'm not making a comment about this either way, but today I was listening to CBC's Radio 1, the main sort of radio station, and they were talking about tampons in men's bathrooms. And that obviously, as anybody knows in this country, that's a very controversial subject. That's something that there are a lot of different opinions on that. But in CBC world, it was just like saying, medicine is good because it helps people live longer, and and I like birds because birds are pretty and they make a nice sound. It's just statements, not even the slightest whiff of controversy. It's just kind of, and this is the problem. That's how they alienated people, because they represent a very small political team, and they push their stuff all the time as if it's just like, oh, this is just the consensus now. This is just true, and nobody objects to this, and that's it.
Even the framing of Cochran's question to Carney on how do you get the people in Alberta to kind of stop, wanting to separate, instead of I mean, you've been taking their money forever, and they don't get a voice. Like, frame it that way. Like, how do you square that? They pay the bills, yet they don't get a voice. But instead, it's framed as how do you get them to comply? How do you get them to comply?
That's the Liberal Party perspective. The Liberal Party perspective is not damn, like, it's really not right. It's actually immoral the way that we've treated Alberta. We need to treat them better. That's not the Liberal perspective. The Liberal perspective is, how do we fool them into not wanting to separate? And so that, how can we make them behave themselves?
Yeah, so you do
Because
stories
it's
like
becoming
they
a
did.
problem now.
You do stories like they did yesterday, and you find some guy in Fort Mac to represent Alberta and the separatist movement. That's how you do it, I guess. Apparently, right? Anyway, that's it for today. We're back tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Thursday. You know, we're almost coming to the end of the month here. Almost coming up this summer, too. Thursday will be May 29th. And we'll be back tomorrow with a really big show. Hope you like it. And I hope you share it. And there you go. Until then, thank you for watching NowMedia.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Colona Now, local, independent. News you can trust.